Mayor Tommy Battle with us tonight. Give it up for Mayor Tommy Battle. So we'll be hearing about his entrepreneurial story and how it led him to where he is today. He will be interviewed by Trey Sharp, CEO of Sharp Communications and Tango Tango. Urban Engine, is this anyone's first Urban Engine event? Show of hands. Cool. Okay, so Urban Engine is a nonprofit organization that propels ideas forward. We're a community-based nonprofit for people who have an interest in professional development, startups, technology, and entrepreneurship. So if that sounds good to you, or you're just looking for ways to get more plugged into the community, hanging out with other movers and shakers who want to do cool stuff, we're your people. There's about 2,500 of us at this point, and we always have a lot of fun. We meet here every Wednesday from 6 to 10 p.m. to collaborate, to learn with one another, talk about our ideas, and talk about how we can move them forward. Like I said, we are a nonprofit organization, so because we have set out some beer, we're not collecting donations. But if you leave here inspired, you've learned something, you take something away with you from tonight's conversation, and you feel like you want to give back so that we can do this again, the website is urbanengine.org/donate. And without much further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Trey.
Man, that was that was a next level baton passing to get from the mayor. So my name's Trey Sharp. I am. Is that clear? I feel like that passed out for a second. My name is Trey Sharp. I am the speaker series director for Urban Engine. So our speaker series, about once a month, we have one of these events, and we sit down with local entrepreneurs who've achieved a lot of success in this local community. We've had folks like Glenn Clayton, CEO of Appleton and Spur, Amanda Howard. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen her name on many billboards around town through the years. Tashia Malakasis of Bell Chev, Brandon Cruz, who I saw around here somewhere earlier, and many other great entrepreneurs. You know, I think one thing about this modern culture that we live in is we tend to be focused on, headlines and kind of quick sound bites. And, something that's cool to me about this event is to be able to really have a meaningful conversation, kind of like you went to breakfast with, in this case, the mayor, or went to lunch and kind of heard more of their story. And you're not getting just that quick bite from social media or a quick bite from, the news station. So if you like this kind of conversation tonight, follow us on Facebook, go to urbanengine.org, sign up for our email newsletter, and come check out future events. Next month, we are having Andy Katos, CEO of Service First Bank. Andy is another great entrepreneur who, some of you might be like, well, banking, how does that relate to tech startups? But Andy's one of the few people in this community that I know who has fundraised from angel investors, early round fundraising for Service First, and then IPO'd the very same company. So really cool story for Andy. So come back next month for that, June 13th. So without further ado, would you like to say a few words to open us up here, Mayor Battle?
Sure. Thank you, Trey. As you sit here and you start thinking about entrepreneurship, you look through our community, and our community is a lot more than just the high-tech world of entrepreneurship. If you go Thursday nights, if you go over to Green Street Market, you're going to see a lot of people who are starting up their own little business. One of them making slaw, a mustard slaw. Somebody else is doing pickles. Somebody else is doing a jalapeno relish. And you look across the board, there's a lot of people getting into business, doing things that are stepping out and doing special things. I was thinking when Trey invited me, I was thinking about, hey, where did I start my entrepreneurship? And it started at age 12 with a paper route. Back in that day, we had about 60 people who took the paper in our neighborhood, and I got on my bike and I would ride around and put the papers at each one of them. And to start off that, the old South Trust Bank had a program for your newspaper deliverers, and they would lend you $35. And so you would get $35, then you would immediately have to pay the person that you were buying the papers from $21. And so you would pay him $21, and you would have $14 left. You thought you were rich, and so you would go out and you deliver your papers and everything. On Saturday, you'd go door to door and you try to collect your money and make sure you collected your money. And then I had I think I had $28 in the bank. And I thought I was rich. I thought I could go out and spend it. But before I could spend it, he was coming back and saying I need my $21 for the next week. And that was my first experience in entrepreneurship is running a paper route. Right after that, we started doing some other things, and even had some things in college where we reached out and did some entrepreneur type projects in college that set you up to be able to get in business, be in business for yourself, and be able to do something that can hire people and make a difference. And that's where you end up with.
I read actually in preparing for this interview, I read that in college you also had a business of selling flowers to parents of new sorority sisters. Is that right?
Yes. We called that the Campus Welcome Company, and three of us got together and we started that. We said, listen, every year these girls come down for sorority rush, and they go through sorority rush. And wouldn't it be nice if their parents gave them flowers? And so we were able to go to the sororities, get the list of everybody going out for rush, and we sent out a letter to their parents that said, dear parents, it's a tradition at Alabama that you give flowers to your daughter when she pledges a sorority, or if she doesn't pledge a sorority, that you show her that you remember her. And it wasn't a tradition, but it sounded good. And we said, we can get you flowers for $18 a dozen, and FTD would charge you $24 a dozen. Here's there's an envelope in here. Send us back in your information and send it back. And this was way back when, this was way back when, before a lot of y'all were born. And so we each of us, to do the postage and the mailing, we each put up, I think we put up $75 each. And back in that day, that was a lot of money for us. We put up $75. We thought, man, if this doesn't work, I'm not going to be able to go back to school. And so we put up our $75, and we had it coming back into a certain P.O. box, and we sent it out. And the first week we had 2 replies. And I was, oh man, we're not going to make it through this year in school. We are not going to make it. We're not going to have any money. After the first week, the next day, we had about 7 more replies. We said, well, maybe we can break even with this. And then the next day, we had 275 replies. And we said, we're in the money. And we were able to, take those and deliver the flowers, and we were able to take the profits. And we each made, for us in that day, we made decent money, and we thought, man, we are on top of the world. We are such good entrepreneurs. And then this lady calls in and said, hello, is this Mr. Battle? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, I'm from the city of Tuscaloosa, and I noticed that you just had a flower delivery service. I said, yes, ma'am. And I thought, well, she's from the city of Tuscaloosa. They're going to give me an award for being an entrepreneur of the year or something. She says, I'm from the business license department, and did you have a business license to do that? And immediately I said, no, we didn't. So all 3 of us trudged down there to see this lady, and she looks at us real sternly and says, is this a one-time deal? We said, yes, ma'am. She says, get out of here. Next time you do something, get your business license. So that's how I got my first time to deal with City Hall there.
I'm sure that was very informative to your current career.
Very.
So to fast forward a little bit through college, I understand that when you finished college, University of Alabama, and you served on the debate team there, which is very well known. You worked for a while as a manager for your dad's restaurant business in Birmingham, from what I understand, and then you made the decision, or had it suggested to you to make the decision by your dad to buy his restaurant in Huntsville. Could you kind of tell us that story of how that came about and what that was like finding yourself as an entrepreneur at, what was this, 25 years old?
24 years old. When I came out of school, my dad had just moved into an ownership position with Britling Cafeterias. We had a chain of about 10 or 12 units all around Birmingham and one in Huntsville. And so he said, come on in with me. He said, let's see if we can make this work. So I came in with him. About 3 years later, all his other partners in there decided they wanted to sell out the unit. So they started to sell out the units. And I thought, if they're going to sell all those units out and I'm working for them, I might need to go find a job. So I started looking around, and I started thinking, what can I do? What kind of job can I have? And my dad looked at me and said, well, listen, we've got a banknote that you can assume, but you'd have to buy that unit up in Huntsville because we hadn't found a buyer for that one yet. And this was on a Friday, and so I said, well, I'll go up there and look at it. So I come up here, and I look at the unit up here, and it's in Dunavant's Mall, where the medical mall is right now, and right on the corner of the medical mall, and there was Britling's Buffet. And so I came in, I looked at it, numbers were good, they were doing good business at the time and everything else, and I thought, And I said, well, that's kind of nice. So I come back home, and I see my dad that evening, and I said, Dad, I'm 24 years old. I don't need to be $230,000 in debt. I'm only 24 years old, and that's a little bit much for somebody who's 24. And he looked at me and said, the wisest thing anybody ever said to me. He looked at me and said, son, what have you got to lose? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I've seen your car. That will not stand as collateral for any bank. He said, I've seen your clothes. Nobody can wear those clothes. And I know they're not going to take your clothes back. And I've seen your furniture, and your furniture is shellacked boards and concrete blocks, so nobody's going to take that. And he said, you really don't have anything to lose. And so that was Friday evening. I went home, and I started thinking about it over the weekend. I said, man, my dad told me something pretty serious, and he's right. And so Monday I came in and said, okay, I'll do this. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make it work. So I ended up coming up, and I took over Britling's, and it was $230,000, and I had to put $10,000 down. Now that was a real problem. I went to see the SBA and got a great little pep talk from them. No money. Went to several banks, and they said, "You want us to lend on restaurants?" And they kind of laughed, and I said, "Yeah." And they said no. Went to a couple other places and couldn't come up with the $10,000. And then I realized that they wanted to close on August 15th, and I got to take over the restaurant August 1st. And during that time, we were doing about $100,000 worth of business a month, and we paid our bills for the food that we had purchased on month 10. So that would be September 10th. And so I had $100,000 that was going to come in. I had to pay my payroll out, and I had to pay some other things. But if I paid all that out, I'd still have money left. And I said, man, I can use what I called the float to be able to pay it and pay that $10,000 down. And I thought I was a genius because I used the float. Now I didn't know that everybody else called that a leverage buyout because you're using, you were using the company's money to be able to buy it out. But it was really kind of interesting as we got into that. The first day as we opened up, I was so proud. I owned my own restaurant at age 24. It's my own business. I opened the front door, and it's one of those glass doors, kind of like those glass doors out there, a big old glass door and everything else made for retail. I opened it up. It fell off the hinges in the ground and broke. And I said, oh, crud. And then I noticed, I said, it's getting a little warm in here, isn't it? And then I noticed that one of the air conditioners had gone out. And by the end of the first week, we had paid out about $6,000 in air conditionings and doors. And I was thinking, man, this may not be all I think it's cut out to be. But it was a great place to learn business. You learn business. I learned how to be the HR manager, the accountant, the PR manager, the financier, and the pot washer all at one time. And it was a great experience in business. And I stayed in that business for 10 years, and it was a great learning experience for business and knowing how to run a business. How many of y'all have been in the restaurant business or worked in the restaurant business? You all know it's 24/7, 7 days a week. Being mayor is a great job after being in the restaurant business.
And I found myself actually buying a business from my dad around the same age as you. And I remember I said to someone that was in a high-up corporate job a few years ago, well, I've just been a small business guy, right? And because I almost had like a complex about it or something. And I remember he said to me, Trey, that's the best business experience you can get because you touch all of it, like you just said, right? You are the HR, the marketing, you're the building maintenance, you're the last line of defense on everything. and you're not just touching one piece of it; you're touching everything. So that's really cool.
Did you ever find that you were wishing though that you had a partner because you just wanted
Oh
someone?
yeah.
It was kind of lonely now, and it
Yeah,
really
it's
is. As a young person running a business and you're sitting there, it's a little bit lonely, and you kind of wish you had a partner just so you could bounce things off of, just so you could talk to. And that's one of the things I see in this community is people do mentors. That is key. Everybody in here needs to go out and find someone who will be a mentor, because as you get in this community, I mean, the people who sit there and mentor with you, and Bill Rourke says he'll mentor you, and you can call him and get advice for free from him. He doesn't want anything from you. Wow. I mean, you can see people, and there's hundreds of people across the board. Every time that we go to the Small Business Awards, somebody says, well, thanks to so-and-so who was my mentor. And that's one of those things that we all forget about it once we get into business, because we said, I got to have all the answers. I got to have all the answers. You don't. There are other people out there who will help you get those answers. And that was one of the things that struck me at 24. But I was always kind of wishing I had someone to bounce things off of.
So who became your mentor or role model, and what did they teach you?
I think it was a number of people who became my mentors. I came in 1980 and took over Britlin's. 1984, I ran for city council. And back in that day, you ran for city council, city at large. And why I ran for council when I was working 24/7 in a restaurant, I have no idea. And we were too young and dumb to know. I was 28 years old, too young and dumb to know we weren't supposed to win. We won, And so all of a sudden, I'm serving on city council. But there were a lot of department heads sitting there in city council that I got to watch, and one knew about HR, one knew about human resources and how human resources was affecting your workforce. One of them knew about insurance. One of them knew about the accounting or the finance side of it, and you could talk to them about finance. I was able to pick the brains of about 15 people who had expertise and knowledge in every section of the city, and they ended up being my mentors. They ended up being the people that, as I listened to them and listened to what they had learned in the business world, I could take it back and apply it back to mine. And that was one of the special things that helped me in the business world. After I left Britlin's and sold it, and the best days of your life, anybody been in the restaurant business, the best day of your life is when you bought your restaurant and when you sold it. But when I sold the restaurant and got out of the restaurant business, I ended up running about 6 or 7 different companies before becoming mayor, and I really enjoyed running companies and applying some of the lessons that we had learned back in the restaurant business back to those.
You mentioned your city council term in '84, and I know you ran for mayor in '88, and didn't make it, and didn't make it back on council. I read that you got a literal pink slip from the city of Huntsville, which is kind of hilarious to think about now.
And I lost that. Man, I've always wanted to have that framed up on the wall, because that tells you that life is fleeting. All of a sudden you're on top of the hill, and all of a sudden you're on the bottom of the hill when you get your pink slip. And when I ran for mayor, there were 5 people in the race. I got in the runoff. We ran through the runoff, and I came in second in the runoff, which means that the public elected for me to go back to the private sector. And and I sat there and I thought, golly, I'm leaving the city of Huntsville. We've done such a good job. The city's going to fall apart. I mean, this city just won't make it if it doesn't have me there. And it's one of those lessons in life that you could go out to Maple Hill Cemetery and you can see how many indispensable people there are in life. And I thought the city's going to fall apart. And the city never missed a beat. And it was really kind of interesting. The lesson that you learned off of that is nobody is indispensable. That if you have a good community, good communities will fill in the gaps in leadership.
I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and read stories, right? Like Steve Jobs, who famously got, removed from Apple and then kind of came back and took it to new heights, kind of like you've done at the city of Huntsville. Yeah. Do you feel like that experience, kind of set you up for later success or taught you lessons along the way? Because I think a lot of folks, they're kind of afraid to try something because they're afraid they might fail or it might not work out, right? So kind of for those folks, do you feel like you were better off to have tried and had that experience, and what did you take from that?
I think everybody can say that they learn more off of a losing experience than they do off a winning experience. When I lost when I lost the mayor's race, of course I felt nobody could do it like I did it and everything else, and learned real quickly that nobody was indispensable. But then I had 20 years out in the free market out there, in the real estate world, in the retail world, in the investment world, that I got to spend 20 years out there, and just I got to spend 20 years raising my son and watching him grow up, and coaching him in baseball and basketball, doing the things that were really important as a father to do. I had 20 years of being able to be involved in my church and serve on committees. I had 20 years of being able to be on committees and chair early works and chair the HIMSI board and chair things that made a difference to the community. And I really do think that the loss in 1988 made me stronger and made me realize that you really do need to give back to your community, and you can give back in numerous ways. You can give back as an elected official, or you can give back as a volunteer in a volunteer capacity. And the time between 1988 and 2008, I think it set me up to be a better mayor when I actually came in, because I had been boots on the ground on some of those committees that and commissions that were working in our community and working for the betterment of our community. So it gave me a good insight into it.
When you look at surveys, people say that they're more afraid of public speaking than they are of death. You've developed a great speaking style. You've got a lot of gravitas, but also, I think you really connect with people. When you look back at people who are very good public speakers now, people like Mark Zuckerberg, Barack Obama, you look at their early days, they weren't very good speakers in a lot of cases. Where did you develop your speaking skills, and can you kind of give some tips for the rest of us?
Okay, here's the tips. My first speaking skills and first try at speaking, I failed miserably. And that's part of what you do. I mean, you go through and you have to learn what's good for you. Some people do great from a written script, and there are certain people, and I have to remind my staff in the office, they're former news people and they're former TV people, and they're rip and read people. They put it on a teleprompter or put it up there, and you can just you memorize it and you read it and go from there. And I'm not that way. I'm much better at just talking from my heart and talking about what I know and talking about what facts that I've been able to gather than anything else. And as you get into this, find your rhythm. And the great thing about being mayor is that you get to speak probably 4 or 5 times a week. So, whether it's at a ribbon cutting, or whether it's at a groundbreaking, or whether it's at a chamber meeting, or whether it's at something else, or at the city council meeting, or whatever, you get to speak 4 or 5 times a week. And after doing that, you get to find your rhythm. What's your rhythm about talking to people? And how can you tell if you're really connecting to people? It really helps when everybody goes like this. So y'all can go like this all night. As you nod, you can see the nodders out there, and you start focusing on those nodders, because as you nod, you can tell when you're really able to touch people. In what I've been doing the last year, it's been very interesting as you talk to people, see what really touches them. What makes a difference in their life, and what makes a difference in life is what makes them want to listen to you and to listen intently.
So let's talk real quickly about what I think is one of my favorite moments of yours as mayor, where you pulled off something that seemed impossible when the situation first arose. Let's talk about what became known as the Restore Our Roads Act. Can you kind of, because you can remember the details, tell the details much better than me. Can you kind of tell us the details of what happened and how you dealt with that situation, how you came up with that strategy?
It was, one of the things our community, as a growing community, lives and dies off of is our road systems. As we build our road systems, our interconnecting system. If we don't have a good interconnecting system, we die. I mean, we go into not being able to get from here to there. The biggest sales point we have in this city is when we start talking about the 18, 19-minute average commute to and from work. Some of us are less than 18 minutes. I'm 7 minutes, but some of us are more than 18 minutes. But our average commute is 18 minutes. And when we talk to people on the east and west coast, you start talking about that, their eyes light up, because they are sitting in they're traditionally sitting in an hour to work, an hour coming home. And I always tell them, so if our average commute is 18 minutes to and from work, it's 36 minutes. Your average commute to and from work is 2 hours. What can you do with an hour, 24 minutes of your life every day? And when you start talking to them like that, they start going, wow, what could I do with an extra hour, 24 minutes a day of my life? And so roads were very important to us from day one. Roads were very important. When I ran for city council in 1984, the number one issue was roads. When I ran for mayor in 1988, number one issue was roads. When I ran for mayor in 2008, number one issue was roads. So roads have already, that's been drilled in my head. Roads are very important to us. And we had just set up with the state. We had, and Rex was there. We had something like, we had something like $300 million worth of road projects that were set up to start in, this was 2010. We're set up to start in 2012, 2014, 2016. And, that was a significant number of road plans that were coming in. And right in 2010, Governor Bentley comes in, Governor Riley goes out, Governor Bentley comes in, he gets a guy named John Cooper to be his ALDOT director. And John is a good friend, good person. Used to run Cybex here in town. And really smart guy, but he has an accounting background. So John came in and was appointed to be ALDOT director, Alabama Department of Transportation director. And John comes in and he gets started off, and the smartest person I've ever seen, got a photographic memory. When he got in and started looking at the AASHTO ratings and what the engineer said you had to do, I mean, he knew that from day one. He read them and then remembered them and everything, and could apply them. He was great, but he was also an accountant, so his debits had to equal his credits. And after about a year in the office, all of a sudden he came around to see all of us, and to his credit, he came and looked you straight in the eye and told you, he said, Mayor, we've had all these projects on the books, and all these projects, these $400 million worth of projects are supposed to start in 2012, 2014, 2016, and my credits don't equal my debits, and we can't do them. And I looked and I said, but which ones can't you do? He said, all of them. And I said, when can you do them? He says, well, we're getting a revised schedule out. And so he starts revising that schedule and gets a revised schedule, and some of them are 2036, some of them are 2040, some are 2042, kind of like we have 565 on there right now, 2042, 2045, 2050. And, if you start in 2050, it's a 7 to 8 year build, so it's going to get finished in 2058. And I told him, so I'm not sure I'm going to be alive at that point to ever ride on that road. And so we immediately, as soon as that happened, we started pushing with our legislatures, and we said, listen, these are state roads. Every one of these are state roads. It's your responsibility, and we'd like you to live up to your responsibility. We don't have the money. Then Rex remembers we went to Guntersville and had a meeting with them and said they were doing an A-TRIP funding where they were going to do road and bridges, and they were going to put $1 billion worth of A-TRIP funding out. So, well, we want to include these roads and these road plans in here that you just took out of our plan. We'd like to include them in this. And they said, no, that's not what this money is made for. This money is made for repair and maintenance of bridges and roadways that are already existing, not anything new. And so then we started doing our publicity drive, and we went to every intersection that was over congested, that we were considering part of this plan, and we went to all of them, and we started doing what we called educating the public. But every time we educated the public, we would talk about the state wasn't living up to their obligations, the state wasn't doing the roads that they promised to do, and the states weren't doing these roads. We got a couple of calls from Governor Bentley because he thought that we were talking bad about him not finishing up his roads that he had promised us. We got a couple of calls from John Cooper saying you're upsetting people down here. I think, Rex, we get a call from Mac McCutcheon also saying you're really making some people mad down here talking about these roads. But after about 10 or 11 press conferences, we had pretty much convince the people of Huntsville that this wasn't just a want or a need. This wasn't just something that we wanted to do. This is something we had to do. And if we didn't do it, we would end up strangling on ourselves. We'd end up going to that hour commute to work, hour commute back home. We'd lose our quality of life. And so as we did that, we finally got the governor up here, and the governor came in with John Cooper and sat down at our table up in our office, that big round table, and we were sitting talking, and we said, listen, Governor, well, why don't we do this? He was kind of saying that he was a little bit tired of us talking about roads and how they weren't fulfilling their obligation on roads. We said, I'll tell you what we'll do. Why don't we do this? We'll put up 50% of the money. You put up 50% of the money. Most of these roads, they're state and federal roads. And in the past, the feds put up 80% of the money, and the state and local money is 20%. And we said, we'll do 50-50. You can take that extra 30% and you can spend it somewhere else in another community if you want to, but we'll put up 50-50. And we were the first ones to come up with a 50-50 plan. And I said, we'll do $125 million over the next 5 years, $25 million a year. You'll put up $125 million over the next 5 years, $25 million a year, and we'll get these 8 or 9 road projects done that are essential to us to keep growing with. And they looked at us, and the governor said, well, y'all going to put up 50%? I said, yes, sir. And he said, nobody's ever done that before. I said, yes, sir. And he looked at Director Cooper and said, I think we can do that. And Director Cooper just kept his lips pursed and said, we'll have to change some priorities, but we'll get that done. And so we ended up getting those road projects put up as a priority for the city of Huntsville because we put up more money. We put up 50%, they put up 50%. Now, the second problem was, and Rex was in the middle of this problem, we had to say where we're going to get our $25 million. Do we have an extra $25 million sitting in the bank? We didn't. Do we have an extra $25 million in our budget? We didn't. But we knew that we had some capacity there. We were sitting at 8% sales tax. The other major cities in Alabama were sitting at 10% sales tax. And after doing the sales on the community and everything, in December, the city council passed 5-0 a vote to add 1 cent to the sales tax so that we could put $250 million worth of roads on the ground in the city of Huntsville, and we could use the money for economic development. That was the investment, and that was an investment of the people of Huntsville made and the people who shopped in Huntsville made because they invested that 1 cent. The results off that investment, what's your return on investment? The return on that investment was Remington, Polaris, GE Aviation, Toyota, Airjet Rocketdyne, Blue Origin. You can go down the list because those jobs started coming in as soon as we passed that and showed people that we would be doing that infrastructure. Polaris, when Polaris came in after they got finished, Ed Heffernan was the lead person with it. We did an after action with him. We said, Ed, what really sold you on us? He said, it wasn't as close as you thought, because they were looking at Tennessee and Georgia. He said, it wasn't as close as you thought. And when we looked at your 10-year capital plan and saw what you were investing in your capital, in your community, we knew that our $130 million investment in a plant in Huntsville, Alabama was going to be a good long-term investment because you were investing back in your community year after year after year. That was key. That investment gave us a return on investment.
And I've always wanted to commend you on that, because to me that was a real example of leadership and like something you expect an entrepreneur or a business person to do, right? Like you were in a situation where kind of everybody would lose. I mean, the state was going to lose out on future revenue. We as a community were going to lose out. And through some kind of hard-nosed negotiation, you brought everybody to a compromise. But when you think about getting the state to come up off $125 million and then convince, I've lived in Huntsville all my life, and these are folks who like low taxes, and, to convince them the value of making that investment of additional sales tax, to me, it was like a political masterstroke,
And it was, if Rex remembers, it was right before election. It was a year before we ran again for election. But it's kind of like you are elected to be a leader. And you're elected to be a leader because you have to do some things, and there are some things that you have to do. You have to lead. We were talking just the other day about Cecil Ashburn and the idea of having to redo Cecil Ashburn. Cecil Ashburn has 14,000 trips a day going across it. Two-lane road capacity is usually 12,000, so you're over capacity on Cecil Ashburn. And to fix Cecil Ashburn to 4-lane Cecil Ashburn, we're going to have to close it down for 13 months. And everybody, I mean, I was screaming, and everybody was screaming when my city engineer sat there and said, "You're already over capacity. The area is growing. It's not going to get any better. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. We've got to fix this, and if we don't fix it now, we'll never fix it. And if we don't ever fix it, then our roads get to where we are over capacity, we're at gridlock, and we cannot survive. That area falls apart out there because we don't have the roadways to support it." That's key. And once she said that, you know, leadership says that you don't just hide your head in the sand. You don't say, "I'm not going to do something." You actually step up and do it. You do what you have to do as a leader to make sure that that the right things happen. And every one of y'all are going to be faced with that at some point in your business life. You're going to have to do something that is, you know, it's not something that you want to do, but it's something you have to do. And you have to do that in your business life. Sometimes you have to do it in your married life. But it is something that when you look and you say, "This is the right thing to do, let's get it done."
You know, you still sound a lot like a business person of you know, you've realized kind of the key thing your customers, the voters want from a mayor is good roads and good commute. Realize that's kind of defining a feature of this community. What kind of similarities are there between entrepreneurship and politics, and how are they different as well? Can you compare and contrast those a little for us?
The one difference is that you can't just say, "This is the road we got to take, let's take it." You have to come back and you have to educate people. You have to bring a crowd along with you.
That's probably the nicest thing about owning your own business. You can be like, "Well, made a decision. That's what we're going to do
Make
starting tomorrow morning."
We're moving ahead. How many remember, what was it, Old School? And Will Ferrell is sitting there and he decides he's going to streak. And he's running down the street, and his wife comes by with all her friends in the car and says, "What are you doing?" And says, "We're all streaking." And she said, "We are." And he looks behind him, and nobody's behind him. Now, you can find yourself out there running without clothes on real quick if you don't take time to make sure that you educate people. And, you know, and just as much as you can do that in your business, too, I mean, you can set a course and say, "We're going this way." You still got to educate your people inside the business to make them understand this is our strategy, this is our plan, and this is where we will end up. Every Friday in the city of Huntsville, we send out what we call a Friday update. And that Friday update has a lot of little funny stories about what's happened during the week and somebody we ran across who did something funny, or we did something funny and messed something up. But the end result of it is it kind of tells our employees about what our direction is, what we're doing, where we want to go, where we want to end up. And as we talk about that, we get buy-in from our employees. Just as much as we get buy-in from the citizens out there, just as much as we want buy-in from the 5 council members sitting there, you got to have buy-in from your employees, because you can be just as strong as you want to say we're going in this direction, but if they don't understand why, sometimes you lose the value of it. So I think one of the things that we have to do, and this is one of the differences in that we still do in business, but we do even to more degree in government, is make sure we tell people what we're doing, why we're doing it. Now, the similarities in business and government are much more than the dissimilarities. The similarities are that government and business are both looking for return on investment. You're both producing a product. You both have customers out there, and every customer in Huntsville, they reminded me of it quite often, that they are a customer. And you know, and they have the same thing in business. One thing I learned in the restaurant business: every complaint has a basis. Everybody, when they have a complaint, you know, you say, "Oh, they're crazy. Oh, this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right." Every complaint has a basis. Somewhere in there, there is a basis for that complaint. There's something that somebody did not do or did do that made that complaint happen. So some of your lessons are the lessons that you learn in the business world apply very well to government, because government is looking for return on investment. When we did Twickenham down there with the Publix and the office building and the hotel, and the apartments all in one area. When we did it, we said we're going to set the standards, and we're going to make sure that any of our retail developments that we offer any kind of incentives to, and the incentive that we offered was an $8 million parking garage there, that we are going to have a 3 to 4 year return on investment on that. And I always said, said if I could get anything in the business world or in my real estate world that had a 3 year or 4 year return on investment, it's a slam dunk. And so we made sure that everything we had built out to be a 3 to 4 year return on investment. And that's not just swapping dollars, that's new dollars coming in. We made 3.4 years was our return on investment on Twickenham. What we did on Campus 805 had a 8-month return on investment, and that's a pretty good deal. All those that we do, that ties right back to your business world. Your business world and your political world are looking for the same things. They want to make sure they're getting a value for the dollar. They're investing a dollar into your company. They want to make sure they get a value back. They're investing a dollar into the city of Huntsville. They want to make sure that they get a return on that investment that they put in.
You've mentioned a mutual friend of ours, Rex Reynolds, a couple times. Rex was kind of your number 2 guy, city administrator at City of Huntsville, and he's kind of my number 2 guy, really my number 1 guy at Sharp Communication now.
Rex was my number 1 guy too. Really, he told me what to do many a times, and I said, he said, you're right.
So, and you mentioned kind of larger organizations trying to align and the things you do in the city to communicate with that many people. It's something I've come to feel like is really important as you get in larger organizations is to have that number 2 person or just kind of other people that are on your leadership team that are there. You mentioned partners, or there are people that are like there with you to bounce stuff. What do you look for in those people you surround yourself with? I think for a lot of us, it's we're kind of looking for folks to balance out areas where we're not so strong in a lot of cases, or sometimes it's time issue. But what do you look for?
A lot of it is you're looking for someone. In our case, Rex was our nuts and bolts person. He was able to take care of the day-to-day activities of what needed to happen in the city of Huntsville, make sure those happened, and he did a great job with it. On the other side, we had somebody on the urban development side who would look out 5, 10, 15 years ahead. And what are we going to do building-wise? What are we going to do development-wise? How are we going to make sure that, how are we going to attract this retail or this industry to us and everything else? That was Shane Davis, and Shane did a great job too. But all 3 of us acted as a team because we would meet every. I got this off of Rudy Giuliani's book Leadership, and it was more a book about how to run the city of New York. They would meet every morning at 9 o'clock and have different department heads there, or different people who were involved in what was going on in the city, and they would meet with you every morning. In New York it was 10:30 because they thought that was early, but we meet every morning at 8:30, and we have what we call our morning meeting, and we have our department, our finance person in there, we have our legal person, we have our city administrator, urban director, myself, and then we have different people. Today we had our planning people in, planning and transportation people in. Tomorrow we'll have law enforcement in. The next day we'll have certain others in, but we do it every morning. And it just keeps you being able to communicate, but it also keeps you together as a team. And that's really important because if you're not a team, you can't work together. And any you've seen organizations before where you have 2 or 3 people going one way and 2 or 3 people going another way, and it just pulls you apart. That's the important thing about learning how to run a business is make sure that you have a team effort, and you've got to be able to have a team effort. And there's sometimes you're going to have to say, hey, I was wrong, or I am wrong about that, and we need to do this, what you said. And you've got to leave an open mind to saying, we're going to all look at this with an open mind and decide what's best, in our case, for the city of Huntsville, and in many cases for best for this company or that company. We're going to decide what's best for us, and then we're going to move forward. And after we make that decision, we're all going to move forward together.
Something else, actually, Rex has told me that basically right after you got elected, you came in and said, hey, we've got to be easier to do business with. And that's as the city of Huntsville. And that's something I think we in the entrepreneurial community think about a lot, right? Because I mean, what's building great businesses like Amazon? They're easy to do business with. Uber is easier than ordering a taxi. Like, they're not solving world hunger or something, but they're easy to do business with. So can you tell us a little about, how did you come in and make the city easier to do business with? Did that help all the new development we see downtown and things like that?
And I think you got to say that that's still, I still consider it work in progress. I don't think that we have conquered that yet. We work on a day-to-day basis of saying, these are our customers. We want to work with our customers. We need to come out with solutions rather than just give them problems. And I came from I was in the real estate world, and your inspector would come by and say, you can't do that, and walk off. I expect him to say, you can't do that, but this is how you can do it, and this will be right. And I'll work with you. I'll come back, or you take a picture of it, send it to me, and make it, and I'll pass it off on inspections. We haven't gotten to that degree yet. We have not gotten as far as I want to get in there. But one of the things that we had to do was put across the idea to everybody, A, that they could call us if they had a problem, but B, that we were there to take care of problems, to work in partnership. We tell every business, your success is our success. And if we can work with you to make you a success, then we've done our job.
So you've been, very successful in Huntsville. I think your last election you won by a record-breaking margin, if I remember right. It's 84%, something like that. You can kind of punch your own ticket up here indefinitely, like Nick Saban at Alabama at this point. So why make the jump into the shark pool that is state politics? What made you decide to take that risk and make that jump out into the great blue yonder there?
Mrs. Battle asked that same question. She said, man, we have conquered everything here. We could be on Easy Street. We could sit here and we could make things work, and we could continue to move forward. And we could. I mean, and we're at a place where right now we're kind of on auto glide. You still have to take care of the individual problems, and you still have to jump in and make sure that you take care of everything, take care of the important things. But if you stay on the path that we're on, I mean, we've got a great history. Sometimes I like to jump ahead 5 or 6 years and see everything all of a sudden put together and see what we've been able to do. But that's wishing your life away. But the state is not in that position. The state of Alabama needs the same things that we need right here. They need roads. They need education. They need to take on education like we had to take on education. They need to start making leadership decisions that maybe aren't going to be so popular. You're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off a few times, and it's going to hurt as we do it. But the state has to do the same thing that the city's done. And if we do that, then the state will, we have the possibility of taking the same plan, strategy, and everything else that we started with here, and we can do that with the state. We started here with, we called it Huntsville a smart place, and we started talking about Huntsville because so many people came to this community and they looked around. They were from somewhere outside Alabama, and they were looking around for different things, and they thought that they'd see the Beverly Hillbillies, or they thought that they'd see the 60s.
My Cousin Vinny or something.
Yeah, they thought they'd see something, and they'd go away, and when they left, they'd be going, wow, I had no idea. We bring people in from up north, and we can't get rid of them. But it's really kind of fascinating. We started doing Huntsville a Smart Place 10 years ago because we wanted people to have a different perception of Huntsville than what their preconceived notions were. And we're doing the same thing with the state. We want to do Alabama a smart place. And when we start talking about the great things happening here, look right here. How many people would be having a co-working night anywhere else in the U.S. on Wednesday night where you're going to spend 4 or 5 hours and you're going to be talking about apps and coding and everything, and you might get to have a beer while you do it, so that's fun. But you look here, we're putting together rocket engines that are going to take man back into deep space and take us to Mars. Mobile is doing, Austal Shipbuilding is building the most highly technical destroyer in the world. Montgomery's doing the cyber defense for the Air Force. Birmingham, UAB's making cures for cancer. Man, what a neat thing to be able to say about our state, that we do things that nobody else in the world does. And so as we start talking about that, we have a lot of potential in this state. we had a lot of potential in Huntsville in 2008 when I came in. Lots of potential, but we had to work hard to make that potential become a reality. And I would love to see us be able to do the same thing for the state.
And I think I've just got about 3 more questions, and we're going to open it up for a little audience Q&A, if that's
Sure.
all right.
Okay.
So if you guys want to be thinking about anything that's got a burning question on your mind. You mentioned earlier Mayor Giuliani's book.
Yeah.
What are 1 to 3 books that you feel like had a significant impact on your life?
Rudy Giuliani's book on leadership was very good because it came in right at the right time. I needed to know how to run a city, and I read the book, and it gave me some great ideas on how to do that. Good to Great is probably one of the better
That's one of my
books.
favorites as well.
Yeah.
That actually sparked off a whole interest for me in
Yeah.
entrepreneurial reading. I've recommended that to a lot of people.
Good to Great is a book about, hey, sometimes being good is a detriment to becoming great. If you recognize that you're good and say, I'm going to rest on those laurels, then you don't become great. That is a great book. And then even though it's 2,000 years old, your Bible is a great book to read. If you want to talk about how to get along with people and how other people didn't get along with people, and how to set some standards about how you should live and how you should relate to people, because that's all business is. It's relating to people and everything. I taught Bible study for 12 years, and every time we went through, we found something different in that book or some different way to think about it that we weren't thinking about it before. And you want to talk about something that gives you a good moral code, that gives you a great moral code.
What piece of advice would you offer your 30-year-old self if you could place a phone call to yourself at 30 years old?
My son's 33 right now. He'll turn 34 this year. And if you had to offer something to him, and you look at what you've done and what you ought to do in the future, what you would say if I could go back and do things over again, is turn off the TV, put down the texting, talk to people, have a conversation. Don't send as many emails, but call people. That gets down to relationship. Some days at City Hall, I wish on Friday that I could just cut off the email and make everybody call somebody. Instead of having email working, I'd like for you to call somebody. Technology is the greatest thing in the world, and technology gives us the ability to utilize better what we have. But there are times when we let technology override the common sense of just working together.
So I'm sure at this stage of being a mayor and running for governor, your time is at a premium. And you mentioned even earlier, you run a restaurant and you're running for city council and all. And we talk about this a lot in Urban Engine. I'm talking about it on the podcast the other day, which you guys should check out, by the way, the Urban Engine podcast. But we were talking about, that kind of entrepreneurial kind of mindset. You just continually want to take on new challenges, So how do you think about investing your time, managing your time today? How do you decide, you decided to be here tonight. How do you decide what opportunities? Because somebody told me a year or two ago, and it stuck with me, if you lose some money, you can make that back. You can never get back your lost time, right? Yeah. So what kind of advice could you give us related to time management?
Time management gets back to the same thing, return on investment. What is your return on investment on the time that you're spending? Is it what you expect? Is it something that is a necessity to you, or are you just wasting your time? And how you pick what you go to determines what you're going to be. And all of us have. Tonight there were 5 different things you go to in the state. But this one was more important to me because this was one where we're touching people who are going to touch other people who are going to touch other people. Every one of y'all have a Facebook page. It'll be all over by the time we get finished. But really, you've got to invest in what you do. And I think invest is a good word, because everything that you choose to go to should be an investment, and you should be able to tell yourself that I'm getting some kind of return off that. And whether the return is feeling good, whether the return is making the community a better community, whether the return is making your family stronger, you should be able to get a return off everything that you do, and you need to value that return, and you need to measure that return and see if it's what you need.
So before we go to just some free-form questions, I think you've got the kind of folks that turn up to an event like this on Monday night are probably folks who are going to be successful and kind of the future movers and shakers.
Sure.
Any parting message you'd like to leave? Just totally blank canvas.
Yeah. I think your biggest message to remember is, you're going to make it. You're going to make great money. You're going to make great strides. You're going to run great companies. You're going to do great things. Nobody does it by themselves. And that's the thing to remember out of all this. You don't do it by yourself. You do it with a team of people. You may be the lead team and you may own the company, but you did it with a team. And if you don't build it with a team, I've seen too many organizations which are so concentric to one person that once that one person goes, they all fall apart. Build your team and build you a strong team. Build a team that is unbeatable. And at some point in your life, you're going to find that you can step out and that team's still going to move on forward. And for a little while, it's going to hurt your feelings because you don't think that they should be able to move forward without you. But then you realize that you've done a good job of managing and bringing people along and bringing people that can actually step up and do the same thing that you've done. You have mentored well and you have taught well. And that's one of the things that you're going to have to, you have to take a step back and add a little humility to yourself, but understand that that was part of your job and that's what you did. You mentored someone so that they could go ahead and they could move forward. And sometimes they're going to do a better job than you did, but you got them to the place where they could do that job.
Well, it's been a pleasure to get to ask you these questions myself tonight. I love these events because this is the kind of conversations I like to have anyway, and so this is a good reason to get to sit down with high performers like you, Mr. Mayor. But we always a lot of our best questions, honestly, come from our audience. So I'd like to turn it over to you guys. Would anybody have a question for Mayor Battle tonight?
Come ahead. Sure.
So I liked your last statement. You had mentioned good to great. So that was level 4 leader versus level 5 leader, setting up your successor to be great. But earlier you had mentioned feeling like, oh, I didn't make being mayor, and how can Huntsville survive without me?
Yeah.
Right? So I think we've all gone through that where we thought, oh, if I quit this job, they're not going to survive without me. But really, everyone will survive.
Yeah.
I think in your position, looking at a new mayor, you get to see what they did and everything, even though you didn't win. But what did you see that the person that did win, what did they do great that you really admired and used when you won? And what do you hope that your successor will see that you did great and they'll use when they go forward?
Boy, what a great question. That's a great question. One of the things is I left, they started to put in some management programs that some people said, oh, that's bull, because they were good to great type management programs and everything. And some people, I can remember people who were around and said, oh, these really don't work. But they were trying to make the city of Huntsville move forward and move better, do a better job of what it did, because we were really caught back in the 50s and 60s. We had not moved forward with technology and done some of the things that we had to do. And when Steve Hedinger came in, he did that. That was important for us to be able to, as a city, to move into somewhat almost close to the 21st century. I think the thing that I would like to see, and as you go out, nobody runs it like you, and it's all pride. A lot of it's pride when you say, hey, nobody can do it like I can. It's going to fall apart. It's going to do this, that, and other. You go out with some humility. If you go out with some humility, you know that they're going to, you trust the people that are coming behind you, and you trust. You have to trust the voters, and everybody says, how can you trust the voters? Man, look at out there what they're voting for and who they're voting in. But really look at it. The voters probably usually work out right, and the thing works out right as you work through that process. Sometimes we make a mistake, and it takes 3 or 4 years to correct it. But in the eternity of things, 3 or 4 years is not is not forever. But if you watch it year after year after year, we have a smart community, but we've got to keep a community that stays involved and has to be able to elect people who they can challenge. They can call on the call out, and they have to explain what they did, why they did it, and what the end result is. When I look at the next generation coming along, the millennial generation is one of the smartest generations I've seen. I mean, you are really technologically, you are very, very smart. Sometimes interpersonal relationships wise, sometimes I question that. But the next step is going to be the kids who come along, who is right now my grandchild, who's 3 years old, and ever since he's been 1.5, he's had an iPhone in his hand. And y'all think you're smart? Wait till those kids come along. Now, will they be able to talk to each other? I don't know. I'm worried about that. But the future generations don't scare me. I think that the future is pretty bright for all of us, because we have people who are coming along who are smart people, but they have a good moral code. We may have to learn some lessons over every once in a while about how to communicate back and forth to each other, but that's okay. That won't hurt us. Nate.
So you've been great at making Huntsville Invitational very welcoming to certain large industries. What are some ways from a state level that you might, in fact, do the flip side of that, make Alabama more inviting or welcoming to startups, to creating business?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. One of the things that we will continue to do is you will continue to try to bring in the big industries, because the big industries make the startup industries easier, because the startup industries will be customers of the big industry. You look right now across the state, Mobile and the shipbuilding community is kind of leading the Southeast, especially with Allstell's doing. Then you go over to Steiner Shipbuilding over in Bayou La Battery, and then you look at what's happening in Mobile with Airbus. And if you've ever seen it, they bring in about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different components, and they put them together and they make an airplane out of it. And I go, wow, one's the fuselage, two are the wings, one's the tail, one's the nose, and they put the fuselage in 2 pieces. And every one of those is shipped over from Europe and brought in, and then they put them together. Now, the future, what does the future hold? The future holds, because they're able to put these planes together, and they're about 30% cheaper than the European Union cost of putting these planes together, that eventually, as they trust us, we start to manufacture those fuselages instead of having to bring them over from the European Union. And as we manufacture those, we'll do them, I guarantee you, at 30% less cost, and all of a sudden it costs them less to build an airplane than it did in the past. And then we can start building a wing, and then we can start building the nose, and we start building the tail. But the whole thing is that we have got to recognize the opportunity that's out there throughout this state. And there's opportunity everywhere. Dothan has this laminated, I-beam has this laminated wood product, which is going to take on the steel industry and can build 14-story buildings out of laminated wood. That is something that we've got to look. Birmingham has this company made by an architect that brings in bathrooms into a hospital. And instead of a hospital having a lot of construction, they take off everything. They put it in and slap it on top of the hospital bathroom, and it's a total one set-in bathroom, and it comes into place, and they don't have to go through the downtime, the close time, the dust, and everything of construction. All of a sudden, they're able to put in a product that is very accessible and very easy, and they save days on it. Those kind of things are the things that we need to take ourselves, and we need to leapfrog off of those into more industry coming in. And as we bring more industry in, especially the highly technical industry of the shipbuilding or the plane building or the even the guys who are doing construction, modular construction for bathrooms for hospitals, as we do those, that gives a chance for entrepreneurs to come in and find new ways to do things. Who would have thought 20 years ago that we would have a company that comes in and has contracts with companies, with Walmarts and drugstores across the nation, and when their air conditioner goes out, they come out there, they put an air conditioning unit on top, take the old one out, then refurbish it so that they can do it with the next one, the next one, the next one. You know, I mean, that's innovation, that's entrepreneurship. They're looking at some of the problems that are out there today, and they're figuring out how to solve them. They're figuring out how to solve problems in the hospital industry because of dust and in construction. They're able to shorten that construction time. Everybody's coming up with better ideas and new ideas, and as we do that, I think we see the state take off. You know, we have a good bench right now, a good bench of people who are public servants throughout this community. Who's going to be the next one? You know, I wouldn't even step into that, because the minute you say it, that puts the kiss of death on them to be able to do it. But you know, there is a good bench of leadership. It might come out of the elected leadership right now, but it also could come out of our business community and our community of people who are who have been giving back to this community year after year after year. That will be. We will work to make sure that whoever comes along is a success, and that's a commitment that I have, because I have a lot of people saying, "Hey, we'd love to vote for you for governor, but we don't want to vote for you because we don't want to lose you." You know, I will make that commitment that we will make sure that person is set up for success, and I think we are at this point. Guys, thank y'all for having me out tonight. It's been fun.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.